going to solve an guesstimate, which is how many phones are sold in India on the annual basis. To solve this guesstimate, let's have some assumptions about it. First one being, let's assume that the population of India is around 1.3 billion. And secondly, let's split it according to region. Let's split it according to rural as well as the urban section. Let the rural and urban split be around, let's say, 70 to 30% of the total population. And you could also start by splitting on the basis of income also, like on the basis of income class, but we are solving it on the basis of region firstly. And yeah, so that's about it. And secondly, these phones that we're calculating, let's assume that these phones include all type of phones. It's not just the smartphones, but the other phones also, right? So let's proceed with the calculation part. So as we have already assumed the rural to urban split to be around 70 to 30%, let's calculate how many people belongs to this rural category and how many belongs to this urban categories. Simply, we would just multiply the population, which is 1.3 billion, into 70% of it. We get around 900. Similarly, for urban, we get around 400 million people who belong to both these categories. Now, to calculate the total number of phones, we would not calculate the individual phones, right? Only. So, to simplify calculation, let's go around with calculating the number of phones in the households, right? So, we need to calculate the total number of households in both of these categories, and that would also be in rural. The number of people in one household would be different as compared to urban, and because let's say in one household there might be kids, there might be people who do not have phones, or share one common phone, or especially in rural category. So we would, to simplify calculation, let's split it according to the households. We are assuming 5 people in rural, we are assuming 3 people in the urban households. For rural, we need to calculate the number of households in rural and urban. So what we do is we would divide the total population in rural, divide by number of people per household in rural, which is 5. So 900 by 5 gives us total number of households, which is 180 million. Similarly, for urban, it is 133 million households. Now, to calculate the number of phones further, we could also do one thing, is that we might also multiply with the number of phones which we could calculate on the rural as well as on the urban basis also. Let's say in rural, let's say people have two, average number of rooms are two, and for urban it might be three or four or something. It might be three, right? Or not four, because we assume 3 people in household. But also to, but to make it much accurate, let's also split it according to poverty line. In rural, let's assume that 70% of people is above poverty line and 30% is below poverty line. So let's assume that, let's calculate the people who are above poverty line, which is 70% of the total population of the rural, which total, sorry, households which are in rural, which we have calculated around 180 million. So 180 million households into percentage of people who are above poverty line gives us the total households which are above poverty line. Similarly, total households which are below poverty line, which is 126 and 54 million. This is for rural only. Now we will calculate how many people have phone in both these categories. We'll multiply average number of phone people have in both these categories. Let's assume that, obviously we have assumed 5 members. So let's assume that people who are above poverty line, they have two phones, right? So 126 into 2, 126 is total number of households above poverty line, 2 is the average number of phones per household, which would give us total number of phones, which is 252 million for the people who are above poverty line in the rural area. Similarly, for people who are below poverty line, let's assume that they have just one phone, right, out of 5. So, which would gives us total population, or total number of households below poverty line into average number of phones, which is 1, right, in that household, which is 54 million. Total combining 54 million phones. Combining these two, it would gives us total number of mobile phones in rural India, which is 306 million. We would also calculate it on the urban basis. Let's say on urban, because we have already assumed that there are three members in one household. So, on an average, we would not split it according to poverty line. In urban, we would assume that at least each household has at least two phones, right? So, which is 133 is what? It is the number of households in the urban section into the average number of phones per household. Let's say it is two. So 266 million is what? 266 million is total number of phones in urban section. Now, what most of the people would do is they would combine this total number of phones in urban, which is 266 plus 306 million, right? Combining these two, they will calculate the total number of phones. But what is asked in the question? It is asked how many phones are sold in India on the annual basis. So we need to calculate it on the annual basis, and for that we need to consider what? We need to consider periodicity of purchase also, because there is a replacement of phones also. People repeat, they buy different phones, because every other day there are different mobile phones which come in the market. So let's assume for rural it is higher, periodicity is higher, which is, let's say, 4. For urban it is just 2. You could also assume anything else. You could take it as 1, you could take this as 3 also. In my case, I've taken it as 4 and this as 2. So, to calculate the total number of phones in India on the annual basis, we would divide the number of phones in each category on the rural as well as on the urban, divided by the periodicity of the purchase in each of the case. Right? In rural it is 4, on the urban it is 2. So which gives us 210 million phones sold in India on the annual basis. And secondly, these phones assume all type of phones, smartphones, and any other type of phone also. But let's say if we just narrow it down to smartphones, so we could also multiply it by the smartphone penetration in India. Let's assume that out of these total number of phones which are sold in India annually, if the smartphone penetration is around 60%, let's say, so we'd multiply it with 60.60 and we'll get the smartphones out of it also. But here in this question we have assumed that we're taking all type of phones, so which gives us 210 million phones sold in India on the annual basis. So that's about the video. You could also this is one way of solving it, right? We could do any other way also. We would first, let's say, split it on the basis of income class, lower middle class, upper middle, like that basis, and then we could calculate the average number of phones. Like, we could go around it also. There are various methods to solve this guesstimate, and but the logic should be correct, and also the assumption that we're taking will also be different. It could be 60 to 40%, also the split could be 60 to 40%, and these small assumptions could vary, right? So that's about the video. If you like, if you want more such content, please like, share and subscribe this video. And if you want to share something, please do share it in the comment section. And yeah, so thanks for watching.